of absence until it's too late. They think love is proven by constant availability, by always being there, always answering, always fixing, always trying to hold things together. But what often happens in relationships is this: the more available you become to someone who is emotionally inconsistent, the less they recognize the weight of your presence. Not because you are not valuable, but because human nature has a dangerous habit of getting comfortable with what is always within reach. When somebody can access your attention at any time, your energy starts to feel ordinary to them, even if it is one of the most beautiful things they have ever had. That's why absence has a way of revealing truth that presence sometimes hides. When you are always around, people can avoid facing what you truly mean to them. They can keep postponing emotional responsibility. They can keep acting halfway interested, halfway invested, halfway serious, because somewhere in their mind they believe you are still going to be there tomorrow. That false sense of certainty creates carelessness. It creates laziness. It creates emotional neglect. And the saddest part is, while one person is becoming more careless, the other person is becoming more exhausted, trying harder and harder to hold on to something that is already being taken for granted. The truth is, people rarely measure value correctly when they are drowning in convenience. Convenience can disguise blessings. It can make a loved person feel common. It can make deep love feel replaceable. It can make emotional safety feel like something small, when in reality, it is one of the rarest gifts you can ever give another human being. If someone always knows you will answer, always knows you will forgive, always knows you will understand, always knows you will stay no matter how little effort they give, they stop seeing your presence as a privilege and start treating it like a guarantee. And the moment somebody starts treating your love like a guarantee, they are no longer honoring its value. This is why your absence creates clarity. Not because absence is meant to punish, not because pulling away is a game, but because space forces people to feel what they ignored when you were too close. Silence has a way of making the truth louder. When your voice is no longer in their day, when your comfort is no longer in their routine, when your energy is no longer filling the emotional gaps in their life, they are finally left alone with the reality of what you brought into their world. And for many people, that is the first time they truly see it. When you stop texting first, when you stop checking in, when you stop trying to rescue the connection every time it starts falling apart, something shifts. The dynamic changes. Suddenly, the person who was used to your effort has to sit with your stillness. Suddenly, the emotional labor you used to do is no longer being done. Suddenly, they are no longer being carried by your consistency. That's when they start noticing the silence. That's when they start replaying the little things. The good morning texts, the patience, the support, the warmth, the emotional availability, the way you made things easier, calmer, softer. Things they barely acknowledged when you were giving them freely begin to feel enormous once they are gone. And that is where clarity begins, because absence does not just reveal your value to them. It reveals the truth to you too. It shows you who notices when you stop overgiving. It shows you who reaches when you stop caring. It shows you who was genuinely connected to you and who was simply benefiting from your emotional labor. That is a painful truth for many people, because sometimes what you discover is not that someone misses you, but that they only miss the access they had to you. They miss being comforted. They miss being validated. They miss being pursued. They miss being emotionally fed without having to do much in return. And there is a difference between being missed as a person and being missed as a convenience. That difference matters. It matters because many people return to situations that hurt them simply because the other person finally reacts when they leave. But reaction is not always reflection. Somebody becoming uneasy in your absence does not automatically mean they now understand your worth on a deeper level. Sometimes it just means they are uncomfortable with losing control of the dynamic. Sometimes it just means they are not used to not having easy access anymore. That is why your absence should not only be about seeing whether they come back. It should also be about observing what exactly they are coming back for. If somebody only notices you when you are no longer available, that says something. It says they were asleep while they had you. It says they were comfortable while you were overextending yourself. It says they did not fully appreciate the emotional investment you were making while it was still in their hands. And while that can be painful, it can also be deeply liberating because it allows you to stop romanticizing a one-sided connection. It allows you to stop confusing your effort for mutual love. It allows you to stop telling yourself that if you just try harder, explain better, love deeper, or stay longer, eventually they will become who you need them to be. Sometimes your absence gives you the closure that conversations never could, because words can be manipulated, promises can be delayed, intentions can be exaggerated, but patterns exposed through distance are harder to lie about. When you step back, you get to see whether someone actually values the connection enough to move toward you with intention. You get to see whether they are capable of self-awareness, accountability, and emotional effort without being constantly reminded. You get to see whether your silence awakens sincerity or just temporary panic. And that information is priceless. One of the hardest things for people to accept is that being deeply loved does not always mean being deeply valued. Someone can enjoy your love and still mishandle it. Someone can benefit from your loyalty and still fail to protect your heart. Someone can like having you around and still not be willing to rise to the level required to keep you properly. That is why your absence is necessary in certain seasons of life. Not to become cruel, not to become cold, but to stop participating in your own neglect. Because every time you stay overly present in a situation where you are being undervalued, you teach the other person that your standards can be bent. You teach them that they can keep receiving from you without truly showing up for you. You teach them that your love does not require careful handling. But when you step back, you interrupt that lesson. You create a new reality, one where your energy is no longer endlessly accessible, one where your peace is no longer up for negotiation, one where your presence must be met with intention instead of assumed by default. That changes everything. Because now the other person is forced to confront what your absence feels like. And if your presence was truly meaningful, they will feel the difference. The strongest part of this truth is that your absence does not need to be loud to be powerful. You do not have to announce it. You do not have to threaten it. You do not have to perform detachment for attention. Real absence is quiet. It is mature. It is self-respecting. It simply stops feeding a cycle that has been draining you. It stops volunteering your heart in places where it is not being handled with care. It stops over-explaining your worth to someone who only understands it when they can no longer reach it. And maybe the most important thing of all is this: your absence should not just be about making them see you. It should also be about helping you see yourself, because in the silence, away from the emotional chaos, away from the overthinking, away from the constant waiting and hoping, you begin to remember who you were before you started shrinking to fit inside someone else's inconsistency. You begin to hear your own voice again. You begin to recognize how much of your peace you had been sacrificing just to remain emotionally available to someone who was not meeting you halfway. That is the real gift of absence. It creates clarity on both sides. It reveals whether they truly value what they lost. And it reveals whether you were ever meant to keep carrying something that was slowly draining the life out of you. Sometimes the distance does not just show them your worth. Sometimes it shows you that your worth should have never been questioned in the first place. One of the most powerful things a person can do in a relationship is stop handing over their emotional power to someone who has not shown they know how to handle it. So many people think power in love comes from being chosen, being wanted, being pursued, being called back, or finally getting the commitment they have been waiting for. But real power has nothing to do with forcing someone to see your value. Real power begins the moment you stop needing someone else to confirm what you already know about yourself. When you are emotionally attached to someone who is inconsistent, unavailable, hot and cold, or unclear about where you stand, your inner world becomes unstable. Your peace starts depending on things that are outside your control. One text can make your day. One silence can ruin your night. One good conversation can fill you with hope. One distant reply can send you into overthinking. Before you even realize what is happening, your emotional center has shifted away from you and into their hands. Now, they are not just part of your life, they are controlling your emotional climate. Because the moment somebody else controls your emotional climate, you stop living from your own truth. Start reacting to theirs. You become more focused on reading signals than honoring standards. You become more concerned with keeping the connection than protecting your peace. You start shrinking, bending, waiting, explaining, and adjusting yourself just to maintain access to someone who keeps showing you uncertainty. That is not love. That is emotional imbalance. An emotional imbalance will make even the strongest person feel powerless. Detachment says, I am no longer willing to let another person's inconsistency determine my emotional stability. That is a huge shift, because once you make that decision, everything begins to change. You stop waking up wondering what they are thinking and start asking yourself what you are tolerating. You stop trying to decode mixed signals and start paying attention to patterns. You stop asking, how do I keep this person interested? And start asking, why am I giving so much energy to someone who is not meeting me with the same level of care? A lot of people lose themselves in relationships slowly, not all at once. It happens in small compromises, small excuses, small betrayals of self. You tell yourself they are just busy. You tell yourself they are confused. You tell yourself they have been hurt before. You tell yourself they need time. And while some of those things may be true, none of them change the emotional reality of what you are experiencing. If someone's behavior is consistently leaving you anxious, uncertain, undervalued, or emotionally drained, then no explanation can erase the impact that dynamic is having on your spirit. The problem is, when you are deeply attached, you often ignore the impact because you are too focused on the possibility. You become emotionally invested in who they could be instead of grounded in who they are right now. You hold on to potential like it is a promise. You start loving the future version of them more than the present reality in front of you. And that is where power starts. Slipping away